Hi, I'm Reed, this is Crowline Publishing. Today we're just doing a quick one. Why don't you give us a like, why don't you give us a share, why don't you give us a subscribe, because I just finished watching Castlevania, the animated show on Netflix. It's Dracula themed high fantasy. I thought it was cool. I really liked it, and it was one of those things that get you in the mood to game. Some things just do. Whenever I see a Star Wars film, often when I see a Star Wars film, I get the same thing. I want to play a Star Wars game. No spoilers here. Let's get into it. Alright, so Castlevania was a series of games. It originated in the 1980s, a very simple 2D side-scroller. But it had a really surprisingly strong sense of lore and story. It was gothic horror and high adventure, and it was meating. And that is a sweet spot for D&D. That is like a more action-packed Ravenloft without any of the problems that came along, especially with 2nd edition Ravenloft. So basically, Castlevania starts off with you are a little man on a screen, you are a collection of pixels, you're in a huge castle, you have a whip, and you are fighting your way through monsters to eventually get to Dracula. And as more and more games came out, it became apparent that you were in medieval Europe, Eastern Europe, and you were a Belmont, the scion of a family of vampire hunters and monster hunters. And from there, more and more lore spun out over the years. Now, there's so many spin-offs, reimagines, alternate timelines, and just companies that rent out the IP so that you're not sure if it's canon or not. It's very hard to pinpoint, this is the story of Castlevania. This is the official timeline. It happens a lot with Japanese media. But here's really quickly how it all plays out. During the Crusades, Leon Belmont was a powerful knight, and a vampire came and killed his fiancée. Leon hung out with an alchemist who gave him a magic whip, and he bound the fiancée's soul to the whip. Magical whip was a really, really important tool to destroy vampires, and the Belmont grudge against vampires began. That vampire actually turned out to be Dracula, of course. So the Belmonts became this family of vampire hunters. The whip and other weapons are passed down. And then, a few generations after Leon, the events of the animated show start. And during the course of the games, Dracula becomes very, very powerful. He recruits these weird guys called Demon Forge Masters, who in D&D terms are summoners. They're very BDSM themed. They're very, very different in the games than they are in the animated show. Dracula makes a slave of death. He becomes a master of alchemical magic. He's killed. And then over and over and over, he is brought back to life, as Dracula is wont to do. Sometimes they stitch his body back together. Sometimes his soul is summoned back from hell. Sometimes he turns out to be a clone of his own son. Oh, goddamn Disney. Goddamn. Anyway, that's it. There's just Dracula keeps coming back. Now, in the animated show, it sort of distills it all down into one fairly easy to understand plotline. At some point, Dracula has met a human woman and fallen in love, and she has kind of tempered his horrible instincts. And of course, a bunch of ignorant peasants find her and go, "Oh my god, you can read," or something like that. "How dare you, you evil sorceress, we're going to kill you." Dracula comes back, goes, "Right, that's it, I've had enough, I'm just going to wipe out all humans." He summons those Forge Masters to him, he summons his vampire generals, he summons all his demons, all his vampires, and he gets ready to destroy the world. Standing against him are the last of the Belmonts, Trevor, with his whip, Alucard, Dracula's son, who was raised to defy evil. He's a vampire, half man, half vampire. And Sifra Belnades, who's a sort of Romany war sorceress. Very high-powered, there's no fooling around. She's just fire and ice, elemental magic, shooting dudes all day long, flying around. And the animated series is the three of them confronting Dracula. It's very cool. You'd like it. And really, it's just one of those media that really just cries out to be gamed in. Once you've seen all the cool fights and stuff, you'll agree with me. And if you have seen Castlevania, you probably already know that it's really, really the kind of thing that inspires cool D&D style adventures. Now, when you are adapting media for your personal campaign, there's two ways to do it. The first is that you try to do it as official as you can. Now, you run a risk with this. You try to bring in as much as you can. You try to bring in it correctly as you can. You try to make it all as canon as you can. And ultimately, it can be not very artistically satisfying. And secondly, you run a problem because a lot of the stuff that you like is idiosyncratic to you. The way that you see, I don't know, Captain Kirk, if you wanted to do a Star Trek thing, he's your Captain Kirk. There are things that you like about him that are unique to you, and when you try to portray him or act him out, he's going to slightly clash with other people at the table, and that can cause, I don't know, cognitive dissonance is not quite the right word, but it's a risk. The other one is that you either just rip out the bits of the media that you like, or just reimagine it entirely. But the most important thing is that you say to the players, this is my take on it. It is different, it is inspired. I tend to reimagine totally, but sometimes you might want to steal individual bits and pieces. I might call the vampire, I don't know, Red Raven. You might call him Dracula. I might call the Belmont family the Ancient Order of the Templars. You might call it the Belmont family. My way is good because I can iron out the kinks that I might not like within the series. I can reimagine it to my needs. I can play to my own strengths, and I can create things and tailor make them for my players. But, of course, if you want the authenticity, then you shouldn't change it. I honestly think that it is way more satisfying as a DM to reimagine everything. You'll find your own way. Anyway, here's some notes towards a Castlevania influenced campaign. Firstly, as a DM to be aware of, ultimately, at the heart of Castlevania is a mega dungeon campaign. Castlevania, Dracula's castle itself, is huge. It's the primary emphasis of the games is to explore these castles, go up through the levels, and deal with Dracula at the end, fighting your way through a bunch of boss monsters. If you have a look on the Castlevania wiki or have a look at walkthroughs on YouTube for all the various levels, you will get a really, really good sense of what Castle Dracula can be. I don't really play a lot of Mega Dungeon campaigns, so I can't really get too far into it, but essentially you are mainly exploring, mapping, bringing back information, and slowly but surely working your way through the castle. I'll discuss a different and I think more rewarding narrative campaign later. From there, choice of monsters, very important for a DM. Classic gothic, zombies, vampires, werewolves, the undead, mummies and wights. There's even a headless horseman. Giant skeletons and Dracoliches come in later on. And so many Draculas, so many vampires. Later on in the franchise, demons become quite heavily involved as a sort of elite shock troop of Dracula's army. I think that you need to really, really go nuts with the vampires, especially the vampire lieutenants. The cruel dandy of Styria, the princess of torment, the raven princess. Give them great personalities, great visuals. These are over-the-top, flamboyant characters who your players are going to want to love to hate. Speaking of PCs, I would put less emphasis on elves and dwarves and hobbits, and I would open up the game to dampires, half vampires, undead PCs, revenants if you like, angels like Azamar sent down from heaven, tieflings born of Dracula's generals. Really emphasize those more monstrous races. Yeah, you can have elves and hobbits and dwarves if you like, there's no reason why not, but why not, break away from that Tolkien for a little while. So if I'm starting out a narrative campaign influenced by Castlevania, I'm starting out basic. No need to be flashy. I would either make up a village or a town, or if I wanted to make it a more historical fantasy, I would pick one from Eastern Europe like Riga or Bucharest. And then, what's Dracula's backstory in my particular world? Is he Dracula? He can be Dracula, but maybe he's Rad von Slarovich, or maybe he's the Funk Vampire Supreme, or Big Rig Dracula Mama. It doesn't matter. It just matters that he is a vampire warlord and something has provoked him. He is here to either destroy all humans or to enslave all humans. The time has come. And his first wave of attacks is the dead start to rise from graveyards. Weird headless horsemen haunting the highways. White raiders have begun to attack and destroy the local city guard. And soon people begin to realize that this isn't just to kill people. They're taking slaves. They're dragging people off into the night. Suddenly the weird old stones up on the hills that no one's gone to in generations, weird fires burn. The ancient fallen down castle. You swear you saw a black coach drive up there. This is Dracula's first wave of attacks. So then you begin to realize that yes, there is a sort of intelligence behind all this. Maybe you cite a local general or something like that, or you take an undead hostage, or you cast, Speak with Dead. There's loads of ways. That general becomes your first sub-boss. That's the first boss for like the first 3 to 5 sessions you eventually take on. You eventually beat the boss, and then you begin to realize that not all Dracula's generals are on the same page. Some of them have different ideas than Dracula. If Dracula wants to enslave everyone, they want to destroy everyone. If Dracula wants to destroy everyone, they want to enslave everyone. Or maybe they're secretly good and don't want anything to do with this. They've just bullied into it. And then, so you can either have like a theme of running around putting out spot fires, making deals with various vampire lords, playing them against each other. Eventually, of course, you confront Dracula directly. Then it all ends up with a siege of the actual vampire castle itself. And how much you want it to be a mega dungeon campaign is up to you from there. It depends on how quickly you want to introduce the castle itself. But alright then, you miserable piles of secrets. I think that is a pretty good introduction to how I would do a Castlevania campaign, which I think I might actually go away and do now. See ya.